Something was buried beneath Buckingham Palace for decades. Catherine found it. And the moment she did, Camilla made a phone call that nobody was supposed to know about. The woman who started to ask questions. Nobody expected Catherine to come back the way she did. When she stepped away from public life in early 2024, the official statement was careful and measured. Abdominal surgery, a planned recovery. The palace asked for privacy, and most people gave it. But then came March, and the announcement that followed stopped the country cold. Cancer. The Princess of Wales had been diagnosed with cancer. She would be undergoing preventative chemotherapy. She needed time. The world watched and waited. What happened during those months of treatment is something only the people closest to Catherine fully understand. She has spoken about it in fragments, about fear, stillness, and being forced to slow down in a life that had never once slowed down before. She talked about sitting with her children and realizing how much she had been moving through rather than living inside. It changed something in her. Anyone who has watched her since her return can see it. She carries herself differently now. There is a steadiness to her that was not there before. A quiet certainty that has nothing to do with performance. She came back with something most people spend their whole lives looking for: clarity. And clarity, inside an institution like the British royal family, is not always a comfortable thing to have, because clarity makes you look. Really look at the rooms you walk through every day without questioning. It makes you look at the documents that sit in filing systems nobody has touched in decades. At the questions that everybody around you has silently agreed not to ask. Catherine had spent years learning the palace, learning its rhythms, protocols, and unspoken rules. She was good at it. She was, by almost every account, one of the most capable people the institution had produced in a generation. But she had always operated within the boundaries she was given. That changed in the months after her recovery. Sources close to the Wales household describe a shift in how Catherine approached her role from late 2024 onward. She became more deliberate, more thorough. She began requesting access to records and briefings that had not previously been part of her regular work, not aggressively, nor in a way that raised an immediate alarm. Just quietly, methodically, the way she does everything. She was building something, a fuller picture of the institution she was going to help lead. It was during this process that she came across a reference that did not fit. A single line in an internal palace inventory document, dated 1989. It referred to a secured storage chamber beneath the east wing of Buckingham Palace. The description was vague in the way that things are vague when someone has deliberately made them so. It listed the chamber as inactive, sealed for preservation, access restricted to senior household staff by prior arrangement only. There was no further detail. No contents listed, no record of anyone accessing it in the 35 years since the entry was made. Catherine noted it. She moved on. She came back to it 3 days later. She asked a quiet question to a member of the household archive team. Had the chamber ever been formally reviewed? Had anyone logged a visit since 1989? The answer she received was careful in a way that told her more than the words themselves did. The staff member said they would need to check. They would get back to her, but they never did. That was the moment Catherine understood she had found something. She did not know yet what was inside that chamber. She did not know what it would mean for the people around her. She did not know that within weeks of her discovery, palace guards would be stationed outside a room that had been invisible for over 3 decades. But she kept pulling the thread, and somewhere else in the palace, someone was already watching her do it. What lives beneath the palace? Most people think they know Buckingham Palace. They have seen the photographs, balcony, and gates. The soldiers were standing perfectly still in their red tunics. They have watched the changing of the guard and read about the grand staterooms and the famous art collection that lines the corridors. It feels like a building that has been fully documented, fully understood, a place with no secrets left. That feeling is wrong. Buckingham Palace has 775 rooms. Of those, only a fraction have ever been seen by anyone outside the royal household. The staterooms open to tourists during the summer represent a tiny sliver of what the building actually contains. Below the public floors, beneath the ceremony and the pageantry, there is another palace entirely. A network of basement corridors, service passages, storage areas, and sealed chambers has accumulated across nearly 3 centuries of royal occupation. Some of those spaces are mundane, utility rooms, old kitchens, storage for furniture that has cycled in and out of use across different reigns. But some of them are something else. Spaces that were sealed not because they were no longer needed, but because someone decided they should not be easily found. During the Second World War, Buckingham Palace was hit by German bombs on 9 separate occasions. King George VI and Queen Elizabeth refused to leave London. They stayed, and beneath the palace, during those years, a series of chambers were constructed and modified to serve purposes that went far beyond ordinary wartime precaution. Secure document storage, private communication facilities, spaces designed to hold materials that could not be lost, seized, or made public without consequences. The palace was not prepared to manage. When the war ended, some of those spaces were repurposed, some were emptied, and some were simply sealed, locked, left alone, allowed to disappear from the active memory of the institution while remaining physically present beneath it. The chamber Catherine had found a reference to sat in this category. Palace archivists who have worked in the building's lower levels describe a section of the East Wing basement that most staff never visit. It is not on any standard tour or maintenance route. The corridor that leads to it branches off from a larger service passage in a way that is easy to miss if you do not know to look for it. The door itself is unremarkable. Heavy, metal-framed, fitted with a lock that was updated at some point in the 1980s, but has not been visibly maintained since. What lay behind that door had been the subject of very quiet, careful speculation among a small number of senior household staff for years. Not open for discussion. Nothing that was ever written down in a memo or raised in a formal meeting. Just the occasional lowered voice. The occasional glance exchanged between people who had been in the building long enough to know that certain questions were better left unasked. Catherine asked them anyway. After the archive team member failed to follow up, she went a different route. She requested a meeting with the palace's head of facilities management. She framed it simply. She was conducting a review of underutilized spaces within the building as part of a broader efficiency assessment. Could she have access to a complete map of the basement levels, including any sealed or restricted areas? The request was reasonable on its surface. The response was not. She was told the information would need to be cleared through the Lord Chamberlain's office before it could be shared. That was unusual. Facilities information does not typically require that level of sign-off. Catherine noted the hesitation. She thanked the official politely and left the meeting with considerably more information than she had walked in with. Because hesitation, inside a palace, is a form of confirmation. She went back to the inventory document. She cross-referenced it with building records from 1944 through to 1952. She found 3 separate references to the chamber across different documents. Each one was vague and used slightly different language to describe the same space. But one of them contained a detail that the others did not. A name, not the name of a room, code, or a reference number, an actual surname. Written in the margin of a facilities report from 1947, in handwriting that the palace's document authentication team would later confirm belonged to a senior royal household official of that era. Catherine stared at that name for a long time. She recognized it, not from history books or from official records, from something far more recent. From a conversation she had heard inside the palace within the last 2 years. That was when she understood that whatever was inside that chamber, it was not simply a relic of the past. Someone alive today knew exactly what was in there, and they had made sure nobody else ever. Camilla's reaction and the call nobody was meant to hear. Information moves fast inside Buckingham Palace, faster than most people realize. The building runs on a system of household staff, private secretaries, aides, and advisors who are in constant quiet communication with one another. It is not gossip exactly. It is something more structured than that, a network of people whose job it is to know what is happening, who is asking what, and which requests are moving through which channels. It is how the institution manages itself, how it stays ahead of problems before they become crises. Which means that when Catherine made her request to the Facilities Management Office and it was escalated to the Lord Chamberlain, the information did not remain contained. Someone talked. Within 24 hours of Catherine's meeting, Queen Camilla was informed that the Princess of Wales had been asking questions about a sealed chamber in the East Wing basement. The details of how that information reached her have not been fully confirmed, but multiple sources familiar with the palace's internal dynamics have described Camilla's reaction as immediate and visceral in a way that surprised even those closest to her. She did not ask what Catherine had found. She asked how far Catherine had gotten. That question tells you everything. Because if you hear that someone is investigating a sealed room and your first instinct is to ask how much they already know, you are not reacting to curiosity. You are reacting to a threat. You are someone who knows what is in that room. Someone who has known about it for a long time. Someone who has spent years assuming that what was hidden there would stay hidden. Camilla composed herself quickly. She is, whatever else can be said about her, someone who has spent decades pushing through situations that required composure under pressure. She has sat across from a hostile press. She also managed the fallout from one of the most scrutinized affairs in modern history, and found a way to stand beside Charles at his coronation, while an entire country formed its opinion about whether she deserved to be there. She knows how to project calm when she does not feel it, but the calm, on this occasion, did not last long. Later that same evening, a member of the household staff reported something they were not supposed to witness. Camilla, in a private sitting room on the upper floor of the palace, made a phone call. The staff member did not hear the full conversation. They heard enough. Camilla's voice was low and controlled, but there was an urgency underneath it that the staff member had never heard from her before. She used the phrase, "It has been found at least twice." She said the name of the person she was calling only once, at the very beginning, before she realized the door behind her had not fully closed. The staff member stepped back into the corridor. They said nothing to anyone that night, but they remembered what they heard. The identity of the person Camilla called has been the subject of considerable speculation among royal insiders. What is known is that it was not King Charles. The king was in a separate part of the palace that evening, and sources confirm he was not made aware of the situation until considerably later. It was not a member of her official staff. The call was made from a personal device, not through the palace's official communication system. That detail matters. Using a personal device rather than an official channel is a choice. It is what you do when you do not want the conversation logged. Whoever was on the other end of that call, Camilla trusted them with something she was not prepared to trust to official channels. And whatever they discussed, the conversation lasted 11 minutes. When it ended, Camilla made one more call. This one to a member of her own private legal team. A legal call at 11 o'clock at night, about a room beneath a palace. Think about what that sequence of events tells you. First instinct was not to inform Charles, not to alert palace security through proper channels, not to consult her private secretary. It was to call someone outside the institution, someone she trusted personally, and then to call a lawyer. That is not the behavior of someone who stumbled into this situation. It is the behavior of someone who has been waiting for this situation, someone who had already thought about what they would do when it arrived. Catherine did not yet know any of this. She was still working her way through the documents, still pulling threads, still moving carefully and methodically toward a door that someone had spent years making sure she would never reach. She was closer than anyone realized, and Camilla was running out of time to stop her. The guards arrive, and what that actually means. On a Tuesday morning in late January 2026, two members of the palace's internal security detail were posted outside a door in the East Wing basement that had not required guarding in living memory. No announcement was made. There was no memo circulation. The staff who worked in the surrounding areas of the building noticed, said nothing to each other directly, and then quietly mentioned it to someone they trusted. By the end of the day, the entire household knew. By the following morning, it had reached people outside the palace walls. 2 guards, 1 door, no explanation. In most buildings, that would be unremarkable. In Buckingham Palace, it was extraordinary. The internal security deployment within the palace follows patterns refined over decades. Certain areas are always guarded, some never are. The East Wing basement falls firmly into the second category. It always has. Posting security was not a routine decision. It was not a procedural update or a response to a general threat assessment. It was a response to Catherine. The question that palace insiders immediately began asking was not whether the guards were connected to her investigation. That much was obvious to anyone paying attention. The question was, who gave the order? Because that question had a complicated answer. The order did not come from William. Sources close to the Wales household have been consistent on this point. William was aware by this stage that Catherine had been looking into the chamber. He had not discouraged her. He had not directed her either. He was, according to those familiar with the situation, watching carefully and letting things develop. That is characteristic of how he operates. He does not move until he understands the full picture. He was still building that picture when the guards appeared. The order did not come from the Lord Chamberlain's office, even though Catherine's facilities request had been escalated there. Officials within that office have privately indicated they were not consulted before the security deployment. They learned about it the same way the rest of the household did, by seeing it happen, which leaves a narrow and deeply uncomfortable set of possibilities. Someone with enough authority to deploy palace security acted unilaterally, without informing William, without going through the Lord Chamberlain, without leaving a clear paper trail that anyone has been able to follow since. They moved quickly and quietly, in a way designed to create a fact on the ground before anyone could ask the right questions. Sealing off the chamber with guards does not destroy what is inside it, but it does something almost as powerful. It makes accessing the contents a formal security matter rather than an administrative one. It transforms Catherine's quiet documentary investigation into something that now requires official authorization at a level that takes time to obtain. It inserts a delay, and delay, in a situation like this, is the next best thing to concealment. Whoever ordered those guards understood that. They also understood something else, that posting security outside a room that has been invisible for 35 years would itself generate attention. It would signal to Catherine, and to William, and to anyone else watching, that something inside that chamber was worth protecting, that the contents were real and the stakes were high enough to act on. It was a desperate move. And desperate moves, inside an institution as controlled as the British royal family, always reveal more than they conceal. William was informed of the security deployment within hours. His response, according to sources, was very quiet and still, the kind of stillness that people who know him have learned to read accurately. He asked 2 questions. Who authorized this? And why was he not informed first? He did not receive a satisfactory answer to either. What he received instead was confirmation of something he had been sensing for weeks, that there were people inside the palace willing to act against his interests and against Catherine's in order to keep that chamber closed. He now knew the guards were not there to protect the contents. They were there to protect someone. The only question left was who. What was inside and why it was hidden? William did not wait long. 3 days after the guards appeared outside the East Wing chamber, he requested a formal meeting with the Lord Chamberlain. He came prepared and had Catherine's documentation. He had the inventory references. He had the cross-referenced building records and the name she had found written in the margin of the 1947 facilities report. He laid everything on the table and he asked one question: open the door. It took another 4 days. Authorization at that level moves through layers that even the future king cannot simply bypass. But it moved. And on a quiet Friday morning in early February 2026, the chamber beneath the east wing of Buckingham Palace was opened for the first time in over 3 decades. Catherine was present, so was William. A senior archivist from the royal household collection was brought in to assess and document what was found. 2 members of the palace legal team stood at the back of the room. Nobody spoke much. The lock was disengaged, the door was pulled open, and the smell hit them first. Old paper, dust, the particular stillness of air that has not moved in a very long time. The chamber was not large, roughly the size of a modest office. Metal shelving units ran along 3 walls, floor to ceiling. On those shelves sat a collection of materials that the archivist would later describe in her preliminary report as historically significant and personally sensitive in equal measure. Sealed document folders, leather-bound correspondence books, several locked metal boxes of the kind used for secure document storage in the mid-20th century. And along the far wall, stacked carefully and wrapped in archival cloth, a series of items that had no business being in a palace storage chamber at all. Financial records. Not royal household accounts, nor duchy paperwork or crown estate documentation. Private financial records, correspondence between individuals, transaction logs, letters that referenced payments made and received across a period stretching from the early 1980s through to the mid-1990s. The archivist began working through the materials methodically. Catherine stood beside her and read as she went. William watched them both. It took less than 20 minutes for the connection to become clear. The surname Catherine had found in the margin of the 1947 report was not a wartime official. That had been a misfiling, a deliberate one, the archivist believed, designed to make the chamber appear historically inert. The actual contents were far more recent. And the name that appeared most consistently across the financial correspondence, the name attached to the transactions and the letters and the payment records, connected directly to the inner circle of the royal household during the 1980s and 1990s. It connected to people who were still alive and relationships that were still active. And in 3 separate letters, written in a hand that the palace's document authentication team would subsequently verify, it connected to Camilla, not to Charles or to a member of staff acting on someone else's behalf. To Camilla directly, to the correspondence she had written and received during the years before her marriage to Charles. During the years when her position within the royal world was unofficial, personal, and deeply contested. It happened during the years when the full weight of public opinion about her role in the collapse of Charles and Diana's marriage was at its most intense and most damaging. What those letters contained, and what the financial records surrounding them documented, pointed to a series of private arrangements that had never been disclosed. Arrangements that, if made public, would reframe the narrative that has been carefully constructed around Camilla's path to the throne. Not dramatically or in a single explosive revelation, but slowly and devastatingly, that documented truth operates when it contradicts a version of events. Buckingham Palace has 775 rooms that an institution has spent decades presenting as complete. The chamber had not been sealed to protect wartime history. It had been sealed to protect someone's carefully managed reputation. And here is the detail that made everything else feel secondary. Tucked inside the final metal box, beneath the correspondence and the financial records, was a single sealed envelope, handwritten on the front in a script the archivist recognized immediately. It was the late Queen Elizabeth's handwriting. The envelope had never been opened. William picked it up carefully. He looked at it for a long moment. Then he placed it inside his jacket, close to his chest, and said nothing to anyone about what he intended to do with it. That envelope is the question nobody can answer yet, and it may be the most important thing found in that room. William moves and the balance of power shifts. William said very little in the hours after the chamber was opened. That is not unusual for him. He processes before he acts. He thinks before he speaks. The people closest to him have learned that his silence after something significant is not absence, it is preparation. He is building the sequence in his mind, deciding what moves first, what waits, and what never gets said out loud at all. But this silence was different. Staff who interacted with him in the days following the discovery described something they struggled to put into words precisely. He was calm, completely calm. And that calmness, in the context of what had just been found beneath the palace, felt less like composure and more like resolution. Like a man who had suspected something for a long time and had just been handed the proof. Like someone who now knew exactly what he was dealing with and had already decided what to do about it. He met with Catherine first, privately. No aides, staff, or official record of what was discussed. They were together for nearly 2 hours. When Catherine emerged, she looked, by the account of one household member who saw her in the corridor afterward, like someone who had just had a very important conversation confirmed rather than started, like the meeting had settled something rather than opened it. Then William met with his private legal team. After that, he met with the Lord Chamberlain. Then he did something that nobody inside the palace anticipated. He requested a private audience with Charles, not through the official scheduling process, directly. He sent word through a personal aide that he needed to see his father alone and that it was urgent. Charles agreed within the hour. The meeting took place that same evening in the king's private study. No one else was present. There was no record kept. The meeting lasted just over 90 minutes. What passed between them in that room has not been confirmed by any source. But what happened immediately afterward tells its own story. Within 48 hours of that meeting, the 2 guards posted outside the East Wing chamber were quietly reassigned. The unauthorized security deployment was reviewed internally. The official who had given the order, whose identity had been carefully obscured since the guards appeared, was identified. They were a senior member of the household staff, with a long-standing personal connection to Camilla's private office. They resigned 3 days later, citing personal reasons. No further comment was made publicly. Camilla was informed of the chamber's contents by Charles himself. Sources described the conversation as brief and deeply uncomfortable. Charles, whatever his private feelings about what had been found, is a man who understands institutional survival above almost everything else. He has spent his entire life watching the monarchy absorb damage and recalibrate. He knows that what cannot be managed openly must be managed carefully. He told Camilla what William had found. He told her that William now had the information, and he told her, in terms that left no room for interpretation, that the matter would be handled through proper channels, and that any further attempt to obstruct that process would have consequences he was not prepared to shield her from. Camilla said very little in response. She canceled 2 public engagements the following week. Her office cited a scheduling conflict. Nobody believed it, but nobody pressed it either. That is how these things work inside the palace. The official explanation exists to give everyone a face-saving exit. Whether anyone accepts it is irrelevant. The message underneath it is what matters. And the message was clear. Catherine, standing inside the institution, shifted in a way that is difficult to quantify, but impossible to miss. She had walked into a process that the palace had spent decades maintaining, and she had, methodically and carefully, and without a single public word, dismantled it. She had found what no one was meant to find and documented it properly. She had brought it to William through the right channels, and she had done all of it while recovering from cancer, while returning to public duties, while being watched and assessed and quietly underestimated by people who should have known better. The sealed envelope from Queen Elizabeth remains unopened publicly. William has not disclosed its contents. He has not indicated when or whether he will. That envelope is the one thread still hanging, the one question the palace cannot yet answer. And William is the only one who decides when that answer comes. He has the vault, the documents, and the letter. Most importantly, he now knows exactly who panicked when Catherine started asking questions. That knowledge does not expire. It does not get filed away and forgotten. It sits with him, quiet and permanent, the way all important information sits with people who know how to wait. The balance of power inside Buckingham Palace did not shift loudly. It never does. It shifted in a basement, in the dark, over a door that was never supposed to be opened. And the woman who opened it is now exactly where she was always meant to be, standing beside the future king, knowing everything.